Well, good evening. It's 6 o'clock. We're going to start this airport commission meeting. And in the absence of a chair, until we elect a chair, I'm going to sort of orchestrate this, not lead it, just orchestrate it. So if you'll stand and join me in a pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Gentlemen, we need to do the approval of the meeting for January 7th. Commissioner Wade is online virtually. And if you both will turn your mics on up at the front so we can hear your voices.
I am present.
Let's do the approval of the minutes and then I guess we'll do the roll call first, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Barrett,
Present.
Commissioner Sutton,
Present.
Commissioner Wade,
Present.
Now we can do the approval of the minutes, gentlemen.
I move we approve the minutes of January 7th, 2026.
I second the approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the election of a chair and vice chair, and I'm throwing that to you all to make those motions.
Want to go first, Sean?
I make a motion for Bill Wade to be chair.
Bill here.
I have a question on that. This is Bill. I don't know what the city's posture would be for if I were to be elected chair, to be the chair and not a resident of Cottonwood. I live near Cottonwood, but I'm in the county. And so I think that maybe the city needs to consider that.
Commissioner Wade, that's not one of the requirements that the chair be a resident.
Okay, I just want to make sure politically it is okay.
There's nothing in the municipal code about the commission chair being a resident.
And I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Chair Wade.
Well, thank you.
Now you need to elect a vice chair, gentlemen.
I nominate Ron Baird for vice chair. And I second it.
I don't think you can second your own motion.
Or Ron Baird could second his. Or Bill Wade now.
Bill Wade.
This is Bill Wade. I second that motion.
All those in favor of Commissioner
Aye.
Baird?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Chairman Wade, it's all yours.
Well, I am looking at a screen right now. It would probably be in favor of Rod moving us through the requirements at the beginning of the meeting, because I really don't have that material in front of me at this moment. And so if Rod could give the initial presentation on what needs to be done for the open meeting law and so forth.
You could ask the vice chair to read the open meeting laws and the public comment.
Correct.
Okay, first of all will be the informational report, brief summary of current events by chairperson or commission members. A public body does not propose, discuss, deliberate, or take legal action on any matter brought up during this summary unless the matter is properly noticed for legal action. Do you have anything to bring up that way, John? Informational
Nope.
report? I don't either. Chairman Wade?
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move to the airport manager's report, March 4th.
Call to the public would be first.
Okay, I don't
Chairman.
have that. See on my agenda. So, yes, let's have a call to the public.
Okay. This is the public for the time to comment on any matter that doesn't appear on the agenda. Commission members may not discuss items not identified on the agenda pursuant to ARS Section 34-431.01H. Action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to criticism, or scheduling the matter for consideration at a later date. Comments are limited to 3 minutes for each person. Mr. Wagner. Okay. Pierre Fox. Okay. Ms. Lecter, are your comments relative to something that is not on the agenda? Yes, I'm sorry. Mr. Hedegaard, same way?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Tracy, I assume the same? Then all the public comments are relative to agenda items. Airport managers report?
Commissioners, we'll go over the avgas sales for January and February, the vert tower count also for January and February, update the capital projects, and discuss the reported noise complaints that came via either phone, voicemails, or emails, and then the FAA's draft transition plan to unleaded avgas. So in January, we sold 2,618 gallons of avgas, and in February, 2,819 gallons. Currently, the price is $5.80 a gallon, and that was raised today from $5.65 a gallon. The average price within the region for self-service avgas is $5.67. I'd be happy to answer questions about that. Seeing none, I'll move on. So the ops count for January and February. For January was 5,553, and February 6,196. So the same 2 months last year, compared to this year, it's 3% less this year, or 337 operations less. So for January, nearly 98% of the operations were not based aircraft. The usage was higher on, it looks like, Tuesday and Thursday. And what we typically see, the hours between 7 in the morning and 7 night were what was used. 43% of the time, takeoffs and landings were to the north. Data for February, almost the same, 97.2 were visiting aircraft, and the days usage were pretty much the same, and the hours were what we typically see, 7 in the morning to 7 at night, and 38% of the takeoffs and landings were to the north. So the windsock has been relocated from the west side of the field to the east side. They did a very good job. It's done. And if you drive down Air Park Drive there at night, it really is bright. So that's a good thing. The guidance signs, the runway end identifier lights, and the precision approach path indicators. That project will get back underway on the 16th of this month, scheduled to be done by April 3rd. Again, it was 2 ADOT grants totaling $621,000. City share was $69,000. So also a good project because both the reels and the PAPIs are out of service at this point. And some of the work includes some wiring inside the vault. Dibble, our on-call engineering firm, has a grant already in place to do the engineering design work to remove obstructions on the airfield. So we're anxious to see that design work when it comes to fruition. And we intend to do the drainage portion of the taxiway reconstruction. We've talked to the FAA. They've set aside $1 million to do that. And Dibble Engineering has repackaged the drawings they already have in place to do that work. And the FAA expects to issue us a grant to do that this summer. So January's noise complaints, 15 voicemail complaints. 9 were repeat calls, 12 were from Clarkdale, 2 from Cottonwood, and 1 from Verde Village. 4 email complaints, either to the airport noise address or my email. All 4 were from Clarkdale, and no Embry-Riddle airplanes operated before 7 in the morning or after 7 at night. So that was actually a surprising number to me. Embry-Riddle did not start flying based on the vert tower data till sometime around the 6th or 7th of January. February was more normal. 32 voicemail complaints, 14 were repeats, 21 from Clarkdale, 6 from Cottonwood, and 5 gave no location. 22 email complaints, again to the airport noise address or the airport manager's email. 10 were repeats, 15 were from Clarkdale, 2 from Cottonwood, and 5 no location. And again, Embry-Riddle did not fly before 7 in the morning or after 7 at night. So this is interesting. We've talked about eliminating leaded avgas for years. This is the first real concrete action of the FAA. They have a draft out for public comment on moving from leaded avgas to unleaded avgas by the end of 2030, and for Alaska 2032. The plan has to support safe and orderly transition. And it really is about the supply chain and the fuel distribution points. Both Lycoming and the other engine manufacturer uses lead. They've used lead in aircraft engines for over 100 years. So the safe and efficient transition will be in the details of how this is done. The comment period for this ends on March 13th, and it really was soliciting comments primarily from industry suppliers and users. But this is certainly a step in the right direction. So let's talk about old business and the B&B Trust gravel sorting operation appurtenant and adjacent to the airport. This is ongoing. The picture of the mobile home is new. That's been put on that parcel in the last month or so. We have a new community development director. I spoke with her last night, and she's very well aware of this. And I've been informed that this is at the city manager and the city attorney's level for some action. The temporary use permit expired last month, and I'm not sure, based on what I've been told, where they are with that. But I can assure you I will follow up on this, and when I'm out there on the airfield, it looks to me like there's more going on than sorting gravel. And I think some of you that have been out there can attest to that also. This needs to be figured out, and this needs to be solved. I will report back on this at the next commission meeting.
Rod, this is Bill Wade. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I was contacted by one of the Manginis, and he indicated that they were looking forward to removing that land where that dirt where the old windsock was at, and using it to help level the land where rocks and stuff have been removed. I was under the impression, and apparently wrong, that I thought Manginis were basically out of that situation and worked out a subcontract with the existing person. But he indicated they're awaiting word from the city so they can go ahead and begin moving that dirt and leveling that area where the windsock's at. I don't have any further information than that.
I need to meet with the city staff to find out how to proceed on this. The agreement that was in place for Mr. Mangini to remove what was south of the hangar row had no end date. It really was not in favor of the city, and it took a long time for them to be finished. And I was out there yesterday, and it seems like the pile is getting bigger down there by the helicopter operation, not smaller. So I will investigate that with the appropriate city staff, get some direction, and in conjunction with Dibble Engineering doing the obstruction removal plan, see how we should best proceed. But I do not want to get into anything else without an end date.
I agree. I think that was a major problem. But I do know that I think the Manginis are waiting word, assume from you, on how and when they should complete that project.
Once I get some guidance and direction, I will be happy to talk to them.
Very good.
More to follow on this. So the city hires on-call consultants to help the airport with engineering because it is a subset of professional engineering. And those companies that do engineering no longer are allowed by the FAA to do planning. So planning companies also compete for being consultants for different airport sponsors around the country. We recently hired Kaufman Associates, who do nothing but planning. Because they're not engineers, they're planners. They have a strong presence in Arizona. They do this kind of traffic pattern analysis and airspace analysis all around the country. They were hired via the FAA's hiring process, which is based on qualifications and not on price. And they have done a study that we've asked them to do on the traffic pattern and runway use. So we have Mr. Corey Lewis and Matt Quick. I've known Matt a long time. And when I was in Sedona, his company was hired to do the master plan that I think is the current one up there. Still is. So without further ado, I will ask them to come up and give their presentation. Set it here for you. Your reading glasses are
There we go.
better than
I have
mine.
my reading glasses on. Thank you, Rod. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening to discuss the traffic pattern and runway use analysis. I'm Corey Lewis with Kaufman Associates, and I've been with the firm for close to 22 years and have performed airport land use compatibility planning studies for airports throughout the United States. So just a brief study overview. So as Rod mentioned, Kaufman Associates was contracted to prepare this study through communication with Rod. We developed a scope, and that scope included, gathering background information, then ultimately looking at some airport alternatives or alternatives for the traffic pattern and operations at the airport. And during that alternatives analysis, we were able to reach out to airport users. So this included 2 pilots and also a representative from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And then ultimately looking at these alternatives, and we'll step through each one of them here in a few minutes, coming up with recommended alternatives that could be moved forward for a potential implementation. So of course, we're here tonight at the Airport Commission meeting, and then ultimately, if this body decides, this report will be forwarded on to City Council for consideration. So just some background information on how Rod provides a lot of detail in his manager's report, but when we're looking at this, the VERTOWER data, which is essential when we're doing a traffic pattern analysis type of study, we're able to look into what's happening at the airport. And in calendar year 2025, we noted that there were 61,195 operations. So when we're talking about operations, that's either one takeoff or one landing. So that is an operation. So it's 61,195 operations for the year. When we're looking at time of day, that approximately 95% of the touch and go operations, which are generally considered our training activity, those occur. 95% of those occur between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. And that's throughout the year. So it takes into account seasonal differences. When we're talking about runway use, this is the direction the traffic is flowing. So kind of on the days that we looked at, it ranged between 80 and 95% of aircraft were using runway 32, which is traffic to the north. So aircraft would depart to the north and arrive from the south. When we're looking at the traffic pattern direction, the most common traffic pattern is a right-hand or a left-hand traffic pattern. Airports can decide to, or communities can decide to change the traffic pattern for their runways. And, this could be for, overflights of avoiding overflights of certain terrain, which could be problematic for pilots, or other types of features, or other existing runways or flight paths. So here at Cottonwood, the traffic pattern direction is for runway 32. That's a right-hand traffic pattern. So as an aircraft would take off to the north, the pilot would turn the aircraft to the right. And we'll see some of these illustrated on the next couple of slides. And then for aircraft to the departing to the south or on runway 14, that's a left-hand traffic pattern. So both of those traffic patterns are to the east of the airport. The traffic pattern altitude, which is the altitude at which aircraft in the traffic pattern are operating, is 1,000 feet above ground level, which is pretty uniform across the United States. Every airport has a 1,000-foot traffic pattern altitude, unless it's specified otherwise. And there's a variety of reasons why that could be. And then the calm wind runway. So this is, aircraft take off into the wind. So when the wind is not necessarily strong enough to indicate which runway would be used, the calm wind runway is runway 32. So that, again, is aircraft operations to the north. So I've mentioned training operations and touch and goes. This is a screenshot from the VERTOWER system. And as I mentioned, this type of information, if you're going to do a traffic pattern analysis, this is invaluable. So what we're seeing at the top is just one aircraft that has come to Cottonwood Airport, and they're performing touch and go operations. Let's see if my mouse is going to come up here. Yeah, so generally, you can see that the aircraft entered the pattern here, and then it began to do a series of touch and go. So this is a typical training operation that the pilots use to get hours and get get proficiency in this environment. So across the bottom, you can see that is the altitude of the aircraft. So you can see that here it descended, and then it completed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 touch and goes essentially, and then left Cottonwood to the north. So this is kind of just gives you a sense of where the aircraft is in the traffic pattern here. This is 4,500 feet, and that's above mean sea level. So as we start to look and get into the alternatives discussion, I did want to provide a little regulatory context. So, we really limited our alternatives to things that could be implemented given the existing regulatory framework. So 49 U.S. Code 401103, this is where when we're talking about whether or not an airport can control where aircraft are flying once they've left the airport, this bit of the U.S. Code states that the U.S. government holds the exclusive sovereignty over all airspace in the United States. So FAA is given that responsibility and has developed the United States airspace and kind of how aircraft are operating once they're up off the ground. The next two items really relate to whether or not airports or communities have the ability to regulate aircraft noise. And so, both through the city of Burbank versus Lockheed Air Terminal, and then later with the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990, it really limits the local jurisdiction's ability to, establish noise-specific rules. And in some of the cases, some of the rationale behind this is that, if Cottonwood has one rule, Burbank has another rule, it is, challenging for pilots, to accommodate all of those rules and also to, both understand those rules and also to safely operate aircraft. And so ultimately with the Airport Noise Capacity Act of 1990, that really limits the ability of local jurisdictions to establish those noise ordinances without additional study. And then finally, Grant Assurance 22, which is when the city accepts a grant for a project, that's funded through the airport improvement program. Grant Assurance 22 relates to economic non-discrimination, and it requires that airports be open to all types and classes of aeronautical use, essentially at all times of the day. So when we start to look at our alternatives, we really wanted to kind of frame those and look at them through a lens of, is it safe? Is it effective? Is it feasible? Can we implement it? And, how likely are pilots to adopt this type of alternative? So really, when we're talking about safety, does the alternative, or the question we're asking, does the alternative promote the safety of pilots, passengers, and people on the ground? Effective, does it have the potential to shift overflights to areas with fewer residential and fewer noise-sensitive land uses? And I think, as I mentioned, we spoke with some pilots, we spoke with Embry-Riddle, and we really heard from them that there's a willingness to make changes to how aircraft are operated here at Cottonwood, but understanding that safety is the top priority. Feasibility. Is the alternative achievable given the constraints such as geography, terrain, and the existing procedures and other operational factors? And then the implementation, the question is, does the airport have the authority to implement the measure? So this gets back to our regulatory context. There are certain things, certain types of operations, or certain types of alternatives that we can't necessarily consider because the airport is unable to do those, promote those types of alternatives given the regulatory context we discussed earlier. And then really the question is, how likely are pilots to utilize the recommended procedure? So it's one thing to make the recommendation, but if pilots are unable to, comply with those, it's not necessarily going to be carried forward. So I'm going to go through each of the alternatives, and you can see at the bottom that there's the conclusion that we drew. Again, this is after discussion with pilots, with Embry-Riddle, also with Rod, and a lot of hours or a lot of people with a tremendous amount of flying experience. So, all right, the first alternative was removing or modifying the calm wind runway. So, as I mentioned earlier, runway 32 is the calm wind runway. So we looked at, does it make sense to switch the calm wind runway to 14? So the kind of where we landed, or what we gathered from our discussions is that this would likely increase arrivals from the north. So if in those calm wind conditions, our aircraft would be coming from the north, and so the communities to the north of the airport would be overflown more frequently. So this also essentially shifts noise from the south to the north. And kind of with those items in mind, we determined that this alternative does not merit further consideration. So the next alternative that we considered was increasing the traffic pattern altitude. In general, the traffic pattern at Cottonwood Airport is the typical 1,000 feet above ground level. As I mentioned earlier, 1,000 tends to be the standard. So if pilots were going airport to airport, they're generally going to expect that the traffic pattern altitude is 1,000 feet above ground level. So as we're thinking about aircraft overflights of residential areas, you may think that increasing the traffic pattern altitude would have the result of getting aircraft higher above residences. While that is the case, it can also elongate the traffic pattern. So if we think back to those the graphic that showed the traffic pattern operations, that would likely increase the dimension in the coverage area of those touch and go operations, and essentially would shift noise to other residential areas. So kind of with that, we determined that this alternative does not merit further consideration.
This is Bill Wade. Can I make a comment on that?
Yes, you may.
I think I understand what you're talking about as far as ordinances are concerned, but of course, Embry-Riddle is probably our prime culprit as far as a lot of noise, and there are agreements that can be made. And as an example, with the 1,000-foot standard pattern, I really don't have a difficulty with that. But the problem I have is that if we retain that, could there be a discussion and agreement with Embry-Riddle to, when they depart on runway 32, that they do a turnout at 800 feet for the crosswind and go ahead and go to 1,000 feet after an 800-foot turnout, which would eliminate a lot of Clarkdale as far as noise is concerned. And I don't think that it would be a rocket scientist to try to figure that out. With, they're 172 aircraft. About the time they get to 1,000 feet, they're right over Clarkdale. And if they could turn out at 700 or 800 feet and enter a crosswind and go ahead and climb to 1,000 feet traffic pattern altitude, it seems like to me it would lessen the noise substantially for a lot of those people that live to the north.
Yes, thank you for that comment. We actually have an alternative that describes just that, and it will be covered later in the presentation.
Okay.
All right. Along the traffic pattern altitude discussion, decreasing the traffic pattern. So this would, reduce the traffic pattern to, say, 500 feet. So this would overall reduce that size of the traffic pattern circuit, but it could also have the result of bringing, aircraft lower to to the ground, decreases margins of safety. There's lower overflights and potentially increases noise in areas that are overflown. So kind of with those in mind, this alternative did not merit further consideration. And so this kind of gets back to the comment about an early turn for touch and go operation. So we're back to our graphic showing touch and go activity. So this suggestion, and I actually believe it came from Mr. Wade in our conversation, is initiating the turn, right? So if you can follow the cursor, the green cursor here, if an aircraft were here on the runway, it began the takeoff roll, lifted off, and then once the pilot and the aircraft reach 500 AGL to begin their turn. So that would, while this area is not completely, undeveloped, if you could see turns that are happening in this area, or if they were more on the 500 feet, you may be able to reach 500 in this kind of square, largely undeveloped area here. So as we're thinking about this measure and some more of the details, it would still aircraft would still climb to 1,000 feet, and just in conversations, it was not tested as part of this study. One of the pilots that we spoke with thought that turning here, you could still reach 1,000 feet, and it would largely the southern portion of the traffic pattern would remain largely the same. So this would be earlier turnouts here. So if it were flown this way, some of these lines would push back, and obviously it has the potential to increase overflights of this area. So we're just trying to balance, if we are making changes, not necessarily shifting noise from one area to another. But I think this alternative merits further consideration as a voluntary measure. So this is discouraging straight out runway 32 departures. So again, when we're talking about a 32 departure, that's departures to the north. There have been some pilots have been implementing a slight turn towards Peck's Lake on departure. So this is not for touch and go operations. This is for itinerant operations. So if somebody was leaving the Cottonwood area and going somewhere else, so they would take off to the north, then make a turn toward Peck's Lake on departure. And this would have the result of increasing overflights of vacant land and shifting aircraft operations away, aircraft overflights away from residential areas. And as I mentioned, this is currently in use by some pilots, but it is not a widely published measure. I believe also Embry-Riddle uses this technique as they are returning to Prescott.
Okay, I have another comment on that. I did bring this up when I discussed it with you folks. And my reference point is really not Peck's Lake, but the TAPCO power plant smokestack, which is a little bit further north. And once again, I think the major entry and exit in Cottonwood of aircraft is Embry-Riddle, and they come from Prescott and they come and fly right over Clarkdale and then enter the pattern. And when they depart, they take off on runway 32, fly right over Clarkdale. I really think the agreement, which I think we should have very strong, is that they enter and exit Cottonwood via that TAPCO power plant. And that way it would take them east, away from the residential areas of Clarkdale. And I think Embry-Riddle, I believe Rod has talked to them about this. I don't think they're really opposed to this, but it's something that we probably need to strongly represent to them that's needed.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Yes, I agree. In our communication with Embry-Riddle, they seemed open to this sort of departure path. And we didn't necessarily, from my recollection, didn't talk about, coming to Cottonwood by that way. But again, I think this alternative does merit further consideration, and we're encouraging further coordination on this. And I think, as you'll see in one of the later alternatives, while coordinating with Embry-Riddle is important, I think it's also important to have a unified message to all pilots about operations at Cottonwood Airport. So this is a clarification on the limit of repetitive flight training. So this relates to the digital chart supplement. So this is a resource that pilots can use that's published by FAA. So the chart supplement currently states that repetitive flight training is not authorized at night. For the purposes of this chart supplement remark, they're defining nighttime as 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. on weekdays and 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. on weekends and holidays. So, one of the items that we that considered was that we could change that language from repetitive flight training to touch and go operations to be more clear and consistent with other publications used by the airport. And it's also important to note that airport does not have enforcement authority. So this is where we're saying not authorized. That may, the airport doesn't necessarily have the authority to allow or not allow this to happen. But, I think it is important, and kind of thinking back to some of the conversations that we had, that pilots are open to making changes, listening to the community about what is and is not working. So. So I think, while there could be an opportunity to, adjust the language in the chart supplement, I think that may be better. The city may be better off kind of looking at all of these alternatives and then making revisions to the chart supplement at that time. So, clarifying the limit on number of aircraft in the pattern. So Embry-Riddle generally, no, they do abide by a rule internally that they don't allow more than 4 aircraft in the pattern at a time. So when pilots, student pilots at Embry-Riddle are selecting an airport where they are going to do their training for the day, if there are already 4 Embry-Riddle aircraft assigned to or headed to Cottonwood, that's the limit. They won't release another aircraft to Cottonwood until one has left. So that does not mean that if there are non-Embry-Riddle aircraft in the pattern that that they won't release 4 Embry-Riddle aircraft to Cottonwood. In communication with Embry-Riddle, it was they indicated to us that they direct their pilots, if there are more than 4 Embry-Riddle or non-Embry-Riddle traffic or aircraft in the pattern, they encourage full stop taxibacks. So full stop taxiback means that the aircraft, rather than doing a touch and go in kind of one movement, is that they will run out on the the aircraft will leave the runway and then taxi back and then take off again. So that decreases the frequency of the traffic pattern activity, the touch and go activity. And then also it discourages elongation of the traffic pattern. So the more aircraft you get in the traffic pattern, the more separated those aircraft need to be, and the size of the traffic pattern increases. So as I mentioned, Embry-Riddle abides by this. Or encourages their pilots to abide by this, but this is something that's not spread to all pilots and not necessarily adhered to by all pilots. So with that, I think this we feel like this alternative merits further consideration. Establishing a left-hand traffic on runway 32. So this would shift traffic to the west. So this is, instead of aircraft operating to the east, this would be going to the west. And all of our pilots uniformly said that, this is not a safe safe alternative given the terrain that is to the west of the airport. So producing a pilot guide. So as I've mentioned, and kind of what we observed throughout this process is that there's a variety of information. Some of it's similar, some of it's contradictory. So I think we felt that producing a pilot guide, which is something that could be shared with the local pilots, pilots that visit all of the flight schools, they would all have the same type of information related to the airport. So this would have a graphic depiction of any noise sensitive areas. So the communities to the north and the south of the airport could be identified, areas to the east as well. And that could be, communicated to the pilots. It could be, I've seen them, printed as a large sign in a 4 foot by 8 foot type sign, posted at the airport. It's, it can kind of be given out to all pilots, at all times, and can be updated as as things change, conditions change at the airport. So, and this would be a primary resource for noise abatement information, and we've seen this in my work. We've done a lot of these pilot guides. We feel like it's an effective way to get the information out. And updating, kind of along those same lines, is updating the airfield signage. So the picture that you see here is out on the airfield, and it's a reminder to pilots. That bottom line says noise abatement in effect. Just kind of as we're reading it and you're looking at it, as a pilot is getting ready to depart or leave Cottonwood, and they're seeing this sign, what exactly does noise abatement in effect mean? So I think, making a connection between, the signage here, maybe some of the other signage, it could be more clear, and pilots would have a better understanding of what the expectations are at Cottonwood. And kind of with that, and as I've mentioned earlier, once the city, the city decides to move forward with any of these alternatives, is to ensure that there's a clear and consistent message across all the platforms. So in summary, the alternatives that through the course of preparation of this study that were identified for that merited further consideration would be encouraging an early turnout for aircraft performing touch and go operations on runway 32 or 32. Discouraging that straight out and potentially expanding that to, in addition to the discouraging straight out on runway 32 departures, identifying an arrival corridor, clarifying the limit of the number of aircraft in the traffic pattern, producing a pilot guide, and then updating the signage. And it's important to note, that while these measures may be beneficial, they would all be voluntary, and it's going to take consistent and continuous education because given the number of flight training operations that happen here, you're going to have a lot of new pilots coming to the community, all the time. So. And then, as I mentioned, it's important to have those, whatever the measures are that are selected and whatever, changes come about or potentially come about, that's clearly communicated to the pilots and consistently across all of the outlets. All right, with that, again, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and be happy to answer any questions about the traffic pattern analysis.
I have another addition. I don't know exactly if this is the appropriate place. I did talk to Rod about this. I think a special project with Embry-Riddle regarding their aircraft coming to Cottonwood for us to explore their utilization of electric aircraft for training. And I know that the battery development, and I know that, we're probably talking a few years out, but not many. I think we would reduce noise in Cottonwood about 60% if we could work out a pilot project with Embry-Riddle to utilize electric aircraft in Cottonwood. Many of the other areas that they go to, like Seligman and Williams and Baghdad, and those areas really not too much of a problem for Embry-Riddle. But Cottonwood has been a problem with noise abatement. And so I really think that we should keep that on the agenda somewhere as far as developing some kind of relationship with Embry-Riddle as far as electric. Back east, if you check some of the latest aircraft documents, there are some flight schools that are starting to use. There are two-place aircraft, and they're good for about an hour on electric. And of course, I think within the next few years, that's probably going to be extended to 2 years, or 2 months rather, or 2 hours, excuse me. And so I think we need to work on that. And I think down the road, it'll probably be a large part of our solution to noise abatement.
All right, thank you for that input. I think we can have further conversation with Rod about, whether it makes sense to include that in the traffic pattern study, or to have it something to be explored further by the commission or by staff.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now honor the requests to speak. Ms. Tracy, would you like to be first? Okay. Mr. Hildegard. Would you speak up to the microphone, please? The airport's a public facility, and there is no landing fee in effect. Does that answer your question? Ms. Lecter, would you speak to the microphone, please, for recording purposes?
Okay, so in my research and reading, my understanding, and please let me know if I'm incorrect, all that we can discuss here is not mandated or any sort of a rule of law of the airport system. It's just all a recommendation. Even the 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. is a recommendation. And as someone who lives in Cottonwood on the greens, I can tell you that at 6:15, I've been woken up many times by extremely loud airplanes that are, in my mind, far too low. So I would really like to know if we're just all spinning our wheels, if the FAA isn't even here today, or if they would ever come and talk to us, if they're the final arbiter of this information. I mean, how do we truly move on when they're the ones that control all this anyway?
Mr. Probst, would you kindly answer that question?
Cottonwood Airport is publicly funded. It is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the city has absolutely no ability to say no to that based on what Mr. Lewis said and what is the law, the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990. There are 6 things that have to be met to put a restriction in place. No airport has ever been able to do that since 1990. And airports like San Jose and Burbank have tried, and the FAA has said no. So it is the FAA that enforces the combined federal regulations, and everything that we've talked about here tonight would be a request and it would be voluntary. And the FAA, as you all know who fly, is not coming to these meetings.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wagner?
That was a lot of information, and I'm going to go and not point by point, but kind of an overall. Number one, just to get some facts straight, the noisiest part of the pattern is the takeoff and the crosswind. Planes coming into on their final, they're practically silent because they're basically gliding in. So the other thing is that I did some math, and the difference in noise between a plane flying over your house at 500 feet or 1,000 feet, there is a 40% reduction in the noise. So a flight pattern at 1,000 feet, if they're having to go over houses, is much more tolerable than putting a bunch of planes together and say, fly this little place at 500 feet over these people's houses. You are going to be punishing those people with extreme noise, where with a larger, wider pattern, a longer pattern, they can stretch that out. And I've been watching ADSB and Embry-Riddle, their pilots seem to be not turning at the exact same place, maybe at 800 feet, 850 feet, 900 feet. And it looks like they are trying to stage their crosswind so they're not constantly bombarding the same houses. They're spreading it out. That makes it a lot more livable. All right. So that's in favor of a longer pattern than narrowing it down. Now, also, Embry-Riddle, the student pilots, they don't climb as fast as you guys do, and they don't have the planes that you guys do. Now, you guys can get in your plane and you can take off and you can hit 500 feet and crank that baby over hard right, and you can be out of there before you get anywhere near Pine Shadows, on the Greens, or Rosetta Ranch Road. And you never got any complaints when that was our pattern before Embry-Riddle started using our runway, because you weren't overflying any homes, and you guys can do that. Student pilots can't do that. Student pilots are worried about keeping the wings level and not climbing too fast and stalling out. So they take longer to get to 500 feet, 800 feet. And when they're getting to 500 feet, they're about at Rosetta Ranch Road. And if they turn at 500 feet, they will be turning over Pine Shadows at 500 feet. So having the turn at about 800 feet puts them above that 500 feet noise marker and puts them out over the Pine Shadows, and on the Greens are highly dense residential areas. There's about 600 residents, about 350, 400 homes in that small area. Okay, now, so, talking about turning out towards Peck Lake, and not Peck Lake, but Tapco, depending on where you are at between the end of the runway and Pine Shadows, and you start that turn off to the right, that is going to put you over on the Greens and Pine Shadows. And depending on what altitude you are, if you're doing that at 500 feet, you're going over that housing area at 500 feet to go out to Tapco. If you wait till 800 feet and you are past Pine Shadows and you make that turn out towards Tapco, that would be great. And yes, you'd be missing a lot of the Clarkdale area. But you can only do that if the pattern is clear and you don't have anybody on crosswind going to be coming back towards you as you're turning out early. So that needs to be something that needs to be considered. Let's see. As far as Mr. Wade's comment about the electric aircraft, we can support that if Embry-Riddle had electric aircraft and they only had an hour battery, if they based their aircraft here, they wouldn't have to fly back and forth. They were busing their students over here at one time, and they could bus their students over. They could use that electric plane that was based here, 2 or 3 of them, and do their touch and goes. And that would be one way to help Embry-Riddle. And I would even be, well, I don't know if we can do it legally, but we would probably have to charge them the same tie down fee as everybody else. We couldn't give them a break on that. So, but we could possibly think about a reduction in a landing fee if we do start a landing fee to help pay for the airport cost, or some way of benefiting, encouraging that electric aircraft. And I think that's about all I got.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Prudhomme. Bauer.
Good evening. Robin Prudhomme Bauer, Mayor of the Town of Clarkdale. And we also have Laura Jones here from Clarkdale. So we're going to be speaking on different points, but this is where we want to go this evening. We really much appreciate being able to comment on this report, and thank you for putting it together. It raises several areas that I hope that we will all be able to have a thoughtful discussion about, not just tonight, but in the future with some of the recommendations that were brought up. So I'm hoping that there is no decision other than to go forward and to consider the points and without finality tonight, because I think we need a lot more discussion so that all the communities impacted by repetitive flight training can come together on outcomes that we all can live with, not just the city of Cottonwood, all of us. But I just wanted to highlight one area that I think should be put into the mix again, is not having a calm wind runway. And that is because 85% of the flights taking off go to the north over Clarkdale, which is the noisiest, and do the turn up there. Having no calm wind runway designated would help disperse that to all of the communities. It's the impact. I know what was said is that, yeah, there's a lot more flights that would come in from landing, but as we were just told, that's the quiet part of the flight, not the takeoff. So with 85% of them going north, the impact is to the north. I believe also that in some of the description of the impacts to Clarkdale communities was not complete. I think there are more impacts than we talk about. There's impacts to the west side of the traffic pattern going out. That's not in there. There's a lot of houses along there. I know I live on that side, so I hear them every single day they go out. Remember, that's the noisy leg going out. So we need to expand what is the impact of that noise area. I just want to highlight that. So I want us to consider some of that it's not just down the line they go out. It's the noise on both sides of that traffic pattern. So it's a larger part of Clarkdale. It's really being impacted by this. I think that's about it, is that I would like that recommendation put back in to relook again at the Calm Wind Runway, not to take it off the table for discussion. Okay, Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And thank you very much for letting us comment.
Ms. Fox? Mr. Fox? Peter Fox?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk tonight. For me, I've only ever seen two types of aircraft, very similar. And these, I guess, are the aircraft that are doing touch and goes. I live on at the edge of, on the greens, overlooking Fox Ridge, right on Main Street. And for me, I've seen numerous times where the same plane must take off from Cottonwood, turn right somewhere over Pine Shadows, turn right again before the river, and they're still climbing when they pass my house. So they're not at 1,000 feet, they're more like 500-600 feet when they go past my house. It's impossible for my wife and I to have a conversation when we're sitting on the patio at the back of the house because the noise is so great. Most of the aircraft that take off and go somewhere else, I don't even hear them. Okay, it's only the touch and goes, and it seems to be weekends, Saturdays, Sundays, where there's it's almost like they're playing follow my leader. So every 40 seconds or so, the noise is so great that we can't even talk. So for me, it makes the one thing I'd like to see considered is that planes don't turn right until they've reached 800 feet or so. Because as was said before, the noise level when a plane's at 800 feet is so much less than it is when it's still climbing up to maybe 500 feet. I've seen it, or I heard it, where planes are coming in on a landing approach. You can't even hear them at 500 feet. Because they're feathering right back, they reduce their revs, but when they're still climbing, it's painful. So that was it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Erickson?
Good evening. And Matt, thank you very much for answering my emails. It was really, I'm not a pilot. And so if I say things in here that maybe just aren't correct, please forgive me. But after reading the report, which I did thoroughly, I'm encouraging the commission to support several changes. First, I support lowering the traffic pattern TPA from 1,000 to 800 feet and recommend the crosswind turn at 500 as recommended by the FAA pilot handbook. From my understanding, talking to some pilots, many pilots already operate within the 800 feet traffic pattern altitude. Embry-Riddle had agreed that to go to turning crosswind is 700 feet, but they're not following it, even though we have it in writing that they would practice that. It's also important to note that the previous study conducted by the same engineering firm was completed in 2006. At that time, the TPA and the AGL remained unchanged. In 2019, without a new study, the Cottonwood Council and Airport Commission changed the AGL to 1,000. There was no documented safety justification for this change that I could find. In my opinion, the adjustment was made to accommodate additional Embry-Riddle training flights. The change was validated in 2022 and implemented in 2023. My question is, why was such a significant change made without a supporting study? We just had one. It appears the change was made as Embry-Riddle's request. I did find it interesting and concerning that the study primarily consulted Embry-Riddle and the local pilots. Residents of the surrounding communities who live with the daily noise impacts were not meaningfully engaged. The approach appears to favor Embry-Riddle over the citizens of Cottonwood and Clarkdale who experience the direct effects of these operations. The taxibacks and repetitive touch and goes operations effectively create the same impact on our community. When there are 2 aircraft in pattern and 2 conducting taxibacks, we can end up with 4 to 6 aircraft repeatedly flying over our homes. This becomes overwhelming for us. I don't know if anybody sit in any of our homes in Clarkdale, but I invite you any day. It's absolutely gotten horrible since they changed to the 1,000 AGL. Additionally, there, as the mayor said, the report admitted several churches, residential developments, and schools in Clarkdale that are affected by the current TPA and AGL. The report also states that flights do not go over Tusagoot National Monument. However, they fly directly over it. Perhaps this did not occur during the limited days of observation, but it does happen. And then about them flying over the easternmost portion of Clarkdale is accurate. They fly directly over our community constantly, daily. The hours of limitations, Embry-Riddle has been fairly good about those. I support the flight hour limitations, but I would prefer, though, that these operations on Saturday and Sunday both begin at 9. It only begins at 9 now on Sunday, if they actually abide by what they say they would. I'd also support limiting the number of aircraft in the pattern. I would like to have no more than 2. Personally, I'd like to have none, but I know that's not going to happen. So anyway, for these reasons, I really respectfully request that you guys, the commission, look at the historic pattern, altitude 800 feet, and really consider what everybody's saying here about making these changes before anything's done final. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Mary Lou Rose.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Mary Lou Rose, and I live in Clarkdale. For over 40 years, Cottonwood Airport safely operated with an 800-foot AGL traffic pattern, following FAA guidance to begin the crosswind turn no earlier than 500 feet before traffic pattern altitude, which for an 800-foot pattern is 500 feet. The 2006 master plan, prepared by the same company that prepared this, when they conducted the 2026, they retained the 800-foot pattern in 2006. There was no discussion of safety discrepancy. In August 2019, the commission notes reflect discussion of raising the pattern to 1,000 feet in coordination with larger flight schools, including Embry-Riddle. Multiple pilots at that meeting requested keeping the 800-foot pattern. Several pilots specifically warned that raising the traffic pattern to 1,000 feet would push traffic and noise into Clarkdale, where it had never been a problem before. In 2022, a NOTAM, Notice to Airmen, raised the single engine traffic pattern to 1,000 until further notice. So the question is significant. What specific safety data between 2006 and 2022 demonstrates that the 800-foot traffic pattern is not safe? This was never a safety consideration. This was just to increase capacity for commercial flight training. It extends the full power climb farther into Clarkdale and Mountain Gate, which has over 500 homes just in Mountain Gate, shifting the impact onto neighboring communities that do not own the airport and do not have not granted easements. There's easements in Cottonwood. That's not reflected in the study either. The 2026 traffic study confirms consultation with Embry-Riddle and 2 local pilots. Residents were not consulted. These changes benefit a commercial flight school that is not located in Cottonwood. There is no documented safety justification. This creates the appearance of preferential treatment. In a federal obligated airport, Cottonwood must consider the interests of everyone in surrounding communities, not just the business needs of a commercial flight school. For decades, the 800-foot pattern was operated safely. I respectfully request that the 2022 NOTAM be withdrawn and that the airport maintain the long-standing 800-foot pattern that's currently published in the chart supplement. That's what's being published right now. And for those are concerned about the tighter pattern, I don't think Embry-Riddle could ever send 4 flights in a small traffic pattern because it wouldn't be safe for them, and maybe they could use Seligman and other alternative airports. So again, I would request you just remove the NOTAM, which wasn't mentioned in the report either, and keep the chart supplement as it is at 800 feet TPA. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Chairman Wade, that concludes all the comments.
Okay, very good. Is there, I do not have the,
Hang on a moment. I apparently missed one.
okay.
Hi, Mr. Wade. It's Laura Jones.
Hi, Laura.
How are you? Hope you're having a good time.
I am.
Laura Jones, council member, Clarkdale. So I want to talk to a few points in the report, and I will try not to go on for too long. I've broken out in a few sections. One is traffic pattern, and it said the variation between a smaller and larger pattern of flight traffic is likely a result of necessary separation between aircraft that causes the traffic pattern to elongate with multiple aircraft are in a pattern. And then we all know in this case, if there are 4 in pattern, this causes the pattern to elongate, and the pattern then pushes out over Clarkdale. It leaves the Cottonwood boundary, and it leaves the boundary that is actually stated as the impact of the Cottonwood Airport. Under existing land use, thank you. I believe you guys got the spelling of Clarkdale right now, and we appreciate that. But this existing land use left out Mingus Shadows, the Palisades, and historic Clarkdale. All of these areas have homes, hundreds of homes, and in the report, they are spoken about as if they are open areas. They are not open areas. And by choosing 3 days, I think that's, I assume for a study like this, you have to figure out a pattern, but I can literally pick up my phone and show you photos of planes going out over historic Clarkdale and going out over Tuzigoot National Monument. It is not hard to document that that is part of the traffic pattern. Then the next section is encourage an early turn for single engine aircraft touch and go operations utilizing runway 32. So, and that section says encouraging an early turn between 500 and 800 feet AGL for single engine aircraft conducting touch and go operations has potential to significantly decrease the upwind leg of the traffic pattern. And this has a great potential, especially for Mingus Shadows, Centerville, Mountain Gate, and the Palisades. If we bring that back down to actually 700 AGL, it really keeps those planes almost out of that pattern completely. And then last, I want to talk about clarifying the limit of the number of aircraft in the pattern. The study says, due to existing compliance and the effectiveness of having no more than 4 aircraft in pattern, this alternative merits further consideration. Specifically, the chart supplement could be updated to state full taxibacks are encouraged when the number of aircraft in pattern exceed 4. In the context of the Cottonwood Airport, the term repetitive flight training has included both touch and go and taxiback operations. For people living under the flight pattern, both of these operations have the same impact, planes flying over their residence in a quick, repetitive fashion. Since, from a noise perspective, they are indistinguishable, this definition is still valid, and I think it should continue to contain both touch and goes and taxi back operations. I also think we need to look at those number of planes in patterns. So it may mean that if 2 aircraft are conducting touch and go operations, there can potentially be an additional 2 conducting taxi backs. If this is the case, an early turn can be established at 5 to 7 feet AGL for single engine aircraft. This 500 to 700 AGL will keep traffic patterns primarily over Cottonwood with greater reduced flights over Clarkdale. And for folks in Pine Shadows and on the greens, I feel ya. It is hard for everybody. But we also have to recognize this pattern of the 500 AGL always turned out over the vineyards. And the vineyards has a navigation easement. The city of Cottonwood implemented a navigation easement over that property. And with that navigation easement, it clearly states that you will be expected to have repetitive flight training over your home. That is not true for the vineyard or for on the greens. That's not true for Pine Shadows, and it's not true for any community in Clarkdale. So I do think these things need to be taken into consideration when you're talking about traffic patterns. Yeah, so I really think, as the mayor stated, I hope there are continual operations and work sessions where these discussions can continue, and that we can continue to move forward and making some real changes that will hopefully help us all. Thank you.
Okay, Chairman Wade, I believe that's all now of the public comments. Is he still in contact?
I am.
Okay.
Is there a, I don't have an agenda in front of me. Is there a move to complete the meeting?
Next item's agenda, excuse me. Next item is adjournment.
Excuse me, there is a recommended action for this
Okay,
regarding recommending an action to the council.
okay. Chairman Wade, do you have any?
What exactly, what kind of recommendation are you looking for, Rod?
The agenda item had a suggested recommendation that the stated recommendations in the study be forwarded to the city council for their review, discussion, and possible action. That's the suggested motion. You can make any motion you want, commissioners.
I'd like to make a motion that we postpone forwarding this to city council. And I certainly have more questions about some of this. I think we ought to discuss it more at the next meeting and postpone sending it forward to city council after we discuss it more.
I agree. I think there are several points that we added some additional language to and needs a little bit further discussion. So I would recommend we hold the recommendation at this time and place it on the agenda for the next meeting. Is there further discussion on that from anybody?
Second it. Do you want to second it?
I'll second that motion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Have you anything further?
Do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move we we adjourn the meeting.
I
Do I hear a
second.
second?
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.